Hello and welcome everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the Lucena position, which is the position that we have set up on the board currently. Now, this is one of the most common and one of the most important theoretical Rook Endgames in chess. Okay, so the main characteristics of the Lucena position are that the king of the superior side is placed on the 8th rank in front of his pawn, where he cannot be harassed by any checks. Okay, so you have the king here on the 8th rank, and the pawn is here doing a fantastic job defending of any possible checks. Okay, like right, black wants to come to rook g1 check. It's obviously not going to work because the pawn is protecting us. Okay, so the defending side is going to be cut off from the pawn by 1 rank. As we see in this example here, the king is a little bit far from the pawn, can't get any closer because the rook is cutting him off. Okay, now the Lucena position is going to be one for all the pawns except for the pawns on the A file and on the H file. Okay, so in that case, this position would be a draw. The side with the extra pawn would no longer be winning. Okay, so this position though, as long as it's not an A pawn or an H pawn, it's going to be winning for the side with the extra pawn, regardless of whose turn it is. Okay, so in this position, we're going to start off by giving the move to black. Let's just see, it's even easier if I were to go first. So if black goes first, starts off with rook to h2. Now, the main idea of this move is to not allow the white king to step out. So as long as the king is stuck here on g8, the pawn can't march forward. Okay, so if, for instance, black were to try another move, like let's say rook to a1, white wins very simply with rook h3, with the idea that we're just going to step out with the king to h7, and black no longer has checks on the h file. The pawn is just going to be queening very soon on g8. Okay, so we have rook h2, the most stubborn defense, and the most important move of the Lucena position, the main theme here, rook to f4. What's the idea of this move? So we're going to be building a bridge for the white king. Okay, so eventually the king is going to come out from g8. It's going to march all the way to the g5 square. And once it gets to g5, the rook on the 4th rank is going to create a so-called bridge where it's going to be defending from the checks of the black rook. Okay, now we're going to take a look and see exactly what this looks like. Black continues with his main defensive idea, which is keeping the rook on the h file, and here a very clever maneuver starts. Okay, so white is going to play rook to e4 check with the idea of removing the king from the e file. Okay, so we can see black has two main moves here, king to d7 and king to f6. All right, now the most stubborn defense here is king to d7, which in that case finally frees up enough space for the white king to come to f7. Okay, so white plays f7, the rook comes to f1 check. So it's immediately, as soon as the king comes out of the g8 square, black is going to start harassing us with checks. Okay, so we have rook f1 check, king to g6, rook to g1 check, king f6. Very important move. Make sure we don't drop the pawn. Okay, so then rook f1 check, king g5, rook g1 check, and here we see the very important move, rook to g4. So black no longer has any checks. The black king is too far away from the pawn to stop it, and we're going to be queening on the very next move. Okay, so here we see the idea of bringing the rook to the 4th rank to create this bridge to block any possible checks that the black rook may have. All right, so I just want to go back to this position really quickly to, well, let's go from the very top. Okay, so we have rook h2, rook f4, rook h1, and we have the check. So we saw what happens in case black plays king to d7. But what happens if, for instance, black goes king f6, right? Because we saw in this example, king d7 just allows king f7. The white king steps out. We have the bridge created, and we're going to win very shortly. Okay, so what happens if king f6? You no longer have king f7. Okay, and obviously you don't have king h7 because the rook is still on the h file here, protecting all of these squares. But of course, we now have king f8, which makes things very, very easy. We're just going to be queening on the very next move. Black is absolutely losing and I have to sacrifice the rook, or better yet, resign. Okay, so then we have, let's go back because there's another position where black has a few options here. So we have rook e4 check, king to d7, and then we see this maneuver here. Now here in this position, we saw what happens if black gives a check on f1. But what happens if black were to keep the rook on the g file so that the king can't come down any further and you can't advance your pawn? Rook to g2, rook to g2. Well, here we see the main theme again of the Lucena position. So white is going to create the bridge, but instead of being on the 4th rank, it is now going to be on the 5th rank, with the idea that we're going to bring the rook to the g5 square. If necessary, we'll play king g6 if black attempts to give any checks on the f file, and then the pawn will be queening on g8. Again, the king is way too far to stop any of this, so this is very easily winning. Okay, so another possibility in this position after king f6 is that black could just leave his rook alone on g1 and go king to d6, which in that case, white again has a very clever maneuver, rook d4 check. Now in this position, black has basically two possible moves that make sense. Okay, so the first one is king c6, and if king c6, white very simply is going to play rook to d8, covering the queening square on g8. Okay, so now the plan is that when black starts checking our king, we're just going to march all the way down to f2, and when black attempts to come back to the g file and stop the pawn, we could just go ahead and advance because our rook covers the g8 square, once again forcing black to either sacrifice a rook or resign. Okay, and so then in this position, after king d6, rook d4 check, black can also try king c7, which doesn't allow the rook to come to d8 and cover the queening square on g8. But in this case, once again, we see the main theme of the Lucena position. All right, so we couldn't create the bridge on the 4th rank because black very stubbornly kept his rook on the g file. Instead, we're going to create it on the 5th rank. And we're going to see the same plan again of bringing the rook over to g5. If necessary, we'll move the king over to g6. And in this position, black's king is even further away from the queening square. So this is very easily winning again. All right, so we're going to take a look at what a position in practice might look like, how to reach the Lucena position. Okay, so we have this position over here, and we have one of the characteristics of the Lucena position, which is that the king is cut off by the rook. All right, so the king cannot assist the rook in any way. He can't step close enough. However, we're missing a few things here. So the king, our king of the superior side, which is the one with the extra pawn, is not on the 8th rank, is not on the queening square, and it's not in front of the pawn. It's behind the pawn. Now, amazingly enough, this position is a lot simpler to win than one might imagine, simply because it's 2 against 1. It's going to be the pawn and the king against this rook. Again, this king cannot join in to assist the rook because he is being cut off by the white rook on f1. Okay, so for example, a position like this might continue with king h5. Good move, of course. We have to bring the king closer to the queening square so that we can meet all the requirements and characteristics of the Lucena position. In this particular instance, black is kind of limited, doesn't have a lot of options here. So he's just going to try to give as many checks as he can and try to distract white from the winning plan. So we have rook h8 check, king g6, rook to g8 check, king h6. Remember, we don't want to go to king h7. We don't want to drop the pawn. Patience is key here. Rook h8 check, king to g7. and Rook H2. So the problem here is black is running out of real estate on this side of the board. If you could go to H9, that would be great. That's not a thing. It goes Rook H2, and now the idea is that he's going to try to launch an attack from behind the pawn and be as bothersome as possible. Okay, so we have G6, Rook to G2, King H7, good move. Rook to H2, and now we have met the second requirement that we needed, which is the king has to be on the 8th rank, on the queening square. And when the rook comes to G2 to attack the pawn, then we now have the king in front of the pawn on the queening square. We have this king cut off by 1 rank. We have all the requirements here for a winning Lucena position. All right, now it's gonna wrap this up. If you guys have any questions, any comments, any concerns, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. If you like this content, please go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you guys next time.